Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us here at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. My name is Cece Doucette, and I am the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And tonight we're going to give you a good overview of what wireless radiation risks are. And Ken Gartner, who is a building biologist, is with us tonight as our co-host, and he's going to get down into the nuts and bolts of these utility smart meters. A lot of folks are receiving letters from National Grid, from Eversource, Unitil, and locally run utilities in their own town. So it's important that we all understand what these technologies bring as far as benefits, but also what the risks are. So I'm going to start by doing a screen share. And again, our slides we will send out tomorrow. So anything that is underlined in the slides, you'll be able to drill down and research directly what the background information is on everything that we present. And we tell everybody, don't take our word on any of this. Take a minute to look through the science and get to know the risks for yourself, and then see if we can focus on solutions. So how did I get involved in this? That MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University with an undergraduate degree in communication. So reading and writing and analyzing and public speaking, these are my happy places. So I'm very grateful to be able to contribute this work here tonight with you with my background. And when my kids were little, I helped to revive our local education foundation here in Ashland, Massachusetts, Metro West of Boston. And we kept hearing about this 21st century classroom, and we were being told that our kids were going to need to have all this technology to succeed in the world. So, good to be parents. We jumped in and started doing some fundraising because my school's budgets were cut to the bone year after year. So we jumped in and started doing fundraising to get wireless infrastructure, to get iPads and Chromebooks and smartboards and minis, and what the industry was telling us our kids were going to need to have access to succeed in our world. So I did that for a number of years. And then one night at book group, my girlfriend Wendy, who's an electrical engineer, tipped us off that there could be biological effects from wireless. And it was book group, so, I just made a mental note of it. But this was back in 2012. And not long after that, I saw that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, now these are the doctors who get the conundrum cases because something in the environment is making people sick, and regular doctors have not been trained. So the American Academy of Environmental Medicine put out a position statement back in 2012 to school superintendents saying, please don't let wireless into your schools. So that raised another red flag with me. And I went, wow, well, what is this? Is there any science? So being a tech writer, I just thought, let me go look. And I was astounded to find literally thousands of peer-reviewed published studies all over the world showing extensive biological harm. And we're going to walk you through the science today, the short-term and the long-term effects. So I was just, I was just little me going, whoa, what the heck? Surely, if I can get my hands on the science and read this, somebody's got to have our backs on this, right? Well, it turns out that they don't. The industry in this country is extraordinarily powerful, and it turns out that this is kind of like a big tobacco on steroids because it's invisible. You can't smell it, you can't hear it, although some people do have microwave hearing from this. Um, and you can't taste it, although my friend Lori lost her taste sensation when she became part of the electrical circuitry with her cell phone and her keyboard that was not good. But anywho, it's invisible, so it makes it really easy to dismiss and to not think very much about. But once I started bringing forth the science to my school committee and my school administrators, they started doing the deep dive. And one of our members, our school committee chairwoman, she and I were passing stuff back and forth going, hey, look, did you see that the National Library in France took Wi-Fi out in 2008 because of the health considerations? Pockets in Israel and Belgium and Italy were already removing it from the schools while our industry was pushing it further and further in on our kids. So when I started really investigating, I brought it to our school committee. It was not an easy conversation to have because they've been told you have to have all this technology or you're going to get a bad review at the state level because industry had already gotten in at the state level. So it was not an easy conversation to have, but I was so proud of Ashland Public Schools for becoming the first in the nation to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with best practices for mobile devices. Turn things off when they're not in use. The industry has pushed the convenience of this, so we tend to leave everything on all the time. But perhaps after you better understand the risks today, you might decide to do things a little differently to stay connected and protected. So only turn the devices on when you need them. Only turn on the Wi-Fi, the access points, the routers, etc., when you need them. And always place a mobile device on a solid surface. And we're going to walk you through the legal fine print in a moment that warns us about putting it on our bodies. So, and I know when I was a little kid and we'd get too close to the television set, my mom would say, stand back, you're going to ruin your eyes. Well, we should all be creating greater distances between these screens and our own eyes. There is an epidemic now of myopia because we are so literally short-sighted with our screens, where our eyeballs are meant to be scanning the horizon. That's what kept our eyeballs round. Now we have this epidemic of myopia with so many children and adults being in the shallows of a screen. It's literally changing the shape of the eyes. Um, so we became the first in the United States to even have this little sign in our classrooms a decade ago. And then I thought, wow, I wonder if there's anything that our legislators could do with this. And I was fortunate to get to know our Senate President, Karen Spilka. We're from the same town. And she and I both served on our local education foundation where we did all this fundraising to get this technology into our schools. So I met with Senator Spilka for coffee hours, and I brought Ashland's sign, I brought the science, I brought a meter, and I measured her cell phone and I measured her district director's laptop, and both devices went right off the charts with this man-made radiation. And they're looking at me like, really? And I said, yes. And nobody knows. It's like tobacco or alcohol or gambling or pornography, or drugs. Adults will make their choices, but aren't we morally obliged to inform them and to protect our children whose bodies are still developing? So Senator Spilka put me with Erin Carty, an attorney in her then office when she was the chairwoman of Senate Ways and Means. And we crafted a very simple bill that would just bring the right minds together at the state level. Let's look at this issue, form a commission, and then decide what to do. Well, that has now been 12 years since we first started writing that bill. And we still have legislation here in Massachusetts. We've done some wonderful things. We've educated many, many up at our state house, and we've actually gotten some of our bills out of committee, but they've not yet been enacted into law. So the public is still largely in the dark, which is why we're so very grateful that you took the time to come and join us to learn with us today. Within 7 months' time, we got a bill passed into law in New Hampshire to investigate this, and they came out with a groundbreaking report documenting the conflicts of interest with the industry and our federal agencies, and making 15 recommendations on what we ought to be doing to inform and protect the public and the environment. And we're going to give you some more information on the New Hampshire Commission report too. And then somebody over in Europe found Dr. Deborah Davis's work. Dr. Deborah Davis founded an organization called the Environmental Health Trust, which is arguably one of the greatest think tanks on this topic in the world. And they have scientists and doctors and industry on their board. It's really quite remarkable. And somebody reached out to Dr. Davis, who, by the way, is a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change, and said, "We are so appreciative of all the information you've put on your website. Can we please get your permission to reference it in a course that we want to build so that we can teach people what this issue is?" And Dr. Davis said, "Absolutely. And you might also want to be in touch with this woman in Massachusetts who's making some inroads with her schools and the legislature." That would be me. And Dr. Mikko Ahonen, who's one of the world's leading scientists in this field out of Finland. So this couple over in Europe contacted Miko and I, and the four of us hit it hard back in 2016, and we built a little course that can literally be taken in about an hour on your lunch hour at work to train everybody on what this issue is, including digital addiction, and then all the biological stuff that goes along with wireless radiation. So just know there is formal off-the-shelf training available today. It's priced very low. The licensing fee is about $15, like the cost of a movie ticket, which helps us to pay our overhead costs. So feel free to look at that. And then Dr. Davis brought a panel of world-leading experts to the Massachusetts State House and had a forum, an educational forum with the legislature to talk about this issue, present the science. And she brought with her the Dr. Sharma from India, who's with the Indian government at the time, and he's done some of the studies that show that we are damaging male sperm and others. And he in India was able to take the public radiation limits that were way up here where ours still are today. And at least on paper, he showed that with political will, you can lower those public radiation limits to something that's more protective. So Dr. Sharma came from India. We had Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And when he retired, he was approached by some of the leading scientists on this. And then he went out and started doing his investigation and came back and said the FCC, or Federal Communication Commission's public radiation limits in the United States are not safe, and neither are Canada's Safety Code 6. So I was sitting there at the State House just in awe, because for 2 years I didn't have anybody I could talk to about this. And here I am sitting there with a captain of industry, world-leading scientists, doctors. We had Dr. Catherine Steiner Adair, who is a child psychologist, and she lectures all over the world. She's written a book called The Big Disconnect, and it talks about every stage of childhood development. And at that point in time, the areas of the brain where like math and science were developing were still coming along on point. But the other areas of the brain that make us human, all of the empathy, all of the imagination, all of the creativity, all of the problem solving, and that was starting to fall behind. And again, this was back in 2016, and we're now a decade beyond that. So I was so honored to be able to meet these experts at our State House. Many of us have presented all over the country, all over the world together now, and we have all the information we need, but it's not going to happen unless the public learns about it, decides to take some steps for themselves and their loved ones, and then perhaps begins to speak up in their own communities. So after being at the State House and meeting all sorts of people from around the Commonwealth, I thought I was the only one who knew about this, but I met people from all over Massachusetts. And so we got together and we formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And just like with my slides here tonight, we don't want to be big and scary. The issue itself is scary enough, but we want to be solutions oriented. So we try to make a welcoming environment. And if you go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology, you will find resources, you'll find information on what's going on with our state agencies and the science and everything else that you'd need. So somebody down at the National Institutes of Health also found my work and asked if I would go down there and co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And I was so honored. We had about an hour to do our program. And so all of our uh, talks are about 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. So they're nice short clips. And I like to include this link for you because if you need something that's highly credible at the National Institutes of Health, then you will hear from Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada. You will hear from Dr. Martin Pall, Pall, who's one of the world's leading scientists, who walks us through the mechanisms of harm that this man-made radiation is causing. You will hear from Theodora Scarato, who at the time was the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust, and Peter Sullivan. Now, I came across Peter's work through a video that I watched online. And Peter had been a fighter pilot for many years, and he was an engineer, and he was up there, with the natural, really high electromagnetic fields inside of a plane that was geared up with radar, which is where this technology came from. It was developed by our militaries. And inside the cockpit of a plane that had all this instrumentation that also had wireless signaling going back to the Earth. So Peter got overdosed on radiation in his work as a fighter pilot, Top Gun. And when he left the military, he moved on to Silicon Valley, where he served as an engineer. And, he had the best of everything, the latest and greatest technology. And it was like his friends who invented the cell phone. So he was totally, totally pro tech until his health started crashing. And he lost unhealthy amounts of weight. His teeth started getting brittle. And when his two sons came up through the preschool years, they both came into the autism spectrum. And in Peter's lecture, he said that he did what many parents will do. They'll figure out that they need to get the family onto clean organic food, so you're not putting any more toxins into the body. He went so far as to do the heavy metal detox on his children and himself. And today, he will tell you, do the digital detox as the first line of defense. 12 hours a night, nothing radiating in your home. And they followed this protocol, and there are doctors who use this protocol. There's a pediatrician out in California, Dr. Toril Jelter, who does this protocol with the families in her care and sees remarkable outcomes. Neither of Peter's sons are on the autism spectrum anymore. They're grown men now and, on with their lives and no looking back. And I had never even heard that that was an option. But there's something called de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom's bloodline. It didn't come from dad's bloodline. It came from somewhere in the environment. And when you begin to address these environmental exposures, then you may have success. We never want to overpromise because all of us have a very different biology individually. So, but Dr. Toril Jelter shares the story of a child that was in her care, and she guided this family to do the digital detox. And within a very short amount of time, maybe a couple of weeks, that boy turned around to his mom and said, "Mom, will you please pass me the scissors or something?" And they both just looked at each other because he'd never heard his voice outside of his head, and his mother had never heard his voice out loud. So again, as crazy as it sounds, because it's invisible and it's everywhere and everybody's using wireless tech, there can be significant health gains. And we'll go through a lot of that with you. So feel free to reference these short video talks in the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference if that's the kind of credibility that might help you open the conversation with people who you might want to share this with. And then one of the major gaps we've had is that we could tell people were developing electromagnetic radiation syndrome. So let me just stop for a moment and talk about the alphabet soup that comes with this issue. EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. These are the pulsations of radiation that come from what we're going to cover tonight, mostly the radio frequency radiation. So all of our devices are built with different little antennas mounted around inside of them. And each one of the antennas pulsates man-made microwave radio frequency radiation out into the field. And so those are electromagnetic fields that are kind of bombarding our environment. But folks, this is one of the antennas that I had the local tech guy pull out of my television, or yeah, out of my television set. So that's all we're talking about is a little thing that plugs into the motherboards inside of our electronics that then radiates man-made microwave radio frequency radiation. So it's not rocket science to fix. Stop these things from radiating, use the technology for the good, and we're going to teach you how to do it more safely. So we had this EMF medical conference, and we brought together world-leading doctors and scientists and attorneys and advocates. And I was honored to speak at the conference on state and local policy for the work that we've done here and guided others with around the country. So please know, for everything that we've broken unwittingly, we have solutions. You can go to this link for the EMF Medical Conference, and there's a document that I prepared for Elizabeth Kelly, who's the executive director of the conference, and it tells you how long each video in the conference is, who's speaking, what their credentials are, and what the topics are. So you could put 20 minutes on your calendar here, a half hour there, watch an hour-long discussion panel here. But that conference was accredited for 24.5 continuing medical education credits, and that was available for 2 years. Now that the accreditation period has expired, we have taken the entire conference and put it online at no cost. So you and your healthcare teams can go get professionally trained at no cost. So please use these resources. We will be sending you our slides, and let's get started with our friend Ken Gartner. Ken, let's go ahead and introduce you here for a minute, and then I will continue with my slides as well, and then Ken will take over to do some of the technical stuff. So I had the great privilege of meeting Ken Gartner in this work here in Massachusetts. He earned his degree early on from MIT. So as we would say here, he's wicked smart. And he had a wonderful career, was going into semi-retirement. And he and his sweetheart built their dream house. Ken, do you want to unmute and tell your story? You could do it so much more justice than I.
Yes, but will I do it as concisely? Um,
I'll cut you off if you're too long.
all right, fine. Yeah, so I have been part of this journey since 2019. I have a partner who's electrically hypersensitive. She cannot be near grid electricity or emanations from radio devices. She's slightly better, but she's effectively housebound or property bound to our safe sanctuaries here. Um, I built a house. I accidentally built a microwave oven. I didn't know it, but I have a metal roof. I have reflective foil insulation all around the house, and I have reflective windows. So any Wi-Fi that we had when we first moved in rebounded back, and it keeps bouncing until it is dispersed or absorbed. And bags of water on two legs are great absorbers of water, and Sweetheart probably absorbed more than her fair share. So um, she got worse, and we started learning. And as an electrical engineer, I was never trained about anything other than shock hazards, nothing about subtle biological differences. And that's what you'll find is there's a large bias with physicists and electrical engineers is a blind spot that will not stop them from speaking with authority on a topic they know nothing about. So be
Mm.
careful what you read on the internet about people saying that there is no such thing. Cece has mentioned there are thousands of studies. Anyway, my journey took me to understand that if I had known if I had known then what I know now, I would have built the house differently. We would have approached it differently. And so building biology is a discipline that helps people live in their residential environment safely. So I focus on electromagnetics, but building biology is a very broad area that also includes environmental quality. So that could be mold, air quality, lighting spectrum, and so on. So I aspire to more certifications, but right now I focus on EMFs because that's where all the action is for us.
Mhm.
I've started my own consulting agency. It's called BioSafer Housing. I'm in the Massachusetts area. I work part-time. You can't not try to work on solving this problem. This is not a moneymaker. There's a lot of people in pain and very, very few people that can help guide people to a better place. So that's what I'm doing in my semi-retirement.
Bless you, Ken. And I have to tell you, he's just one of the nicest people I know. And that's the best part of doing this work is we get to meet these truly genuine people who really just want to help our children, our society, our pollinators, our bees, and our trees because they are equally affected by this man-made radiation. So I'm going to move on and talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Ken. Okay. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to show you the legal fine print that's been in our own cell phones, for example, and give you a demonstration of what the radiation looks like. We'll talk about just what are these radio frequencies? What does the science tell us? And why don't we know? If this is so bad, why don't we know? And then we'll take a look at the things that we do have control over with our own personal stuff. And then we're going to talk about solutions for what you and I can do differently to protect ourselves. And then we're going to really have Ken get into the nitty gritty on these smart meters. And once again, focus on solutions. What can we do? What have people been doing in the background to really give us a leg up to open these difficult conversations with our towns and our legislators? And then we will open it up for questions and answers. So we ask that we keep the chat relatively quiet while we're presenting, so it's not a distraction to others who are trying to pay attention to the presentation. But by all means, drop questions into the chat, and we will circle back at the Q&A at the end. And usually we have enough time that we can ask people to ask their questions in person as well. So we'll take your questions, but hang in there with us. And let's see. So if you have an iPhone, I invite you right now to take it out and go into settings. And you'll find the same information in an Android or a Google phone, but I know exactly where it is in the iPhone. So our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have a web page called See the Fine Print, where we can look at some of these disclaimers that have allowed industry to do what they've done. They put it in their legal fine print, which none of us had ever really taken a look at, but that's how they covered their legal backside. So for example, while you're getting your phones out, go into settings. The iPad had a disclaimer in there talking about seizures, blackouts, eye strain from the antennas in these devices. So all of our devices have something like this. So from the iPhone, from settings, scroll down just a little bit and hit general. Go all the way down to the bottom and hit legal and regulatory. Settings, general, legal and regulatory. And then on the next screen, 4 down from the top, you'll see RF exposure. That's this radio frequency radiation, microwave radiation, electromagnetic fields that they politely call energy because it is a man-made energy form. And when we read this disclaimer, it warns us that they tested this device at a distance from the body. At the bottom of that first big paragraph, it says they tested it at a distance from the body. So if you're holding it with no separation, you are getting even more radiation than what our Federal Communications Commission's guidelines recommend. And those, by the way, were never biologically safety tested. All they did was put some gel in the mannequin of a head, this specific anthropomorphic mannequin or SAM. They put gel inside the head, put a probe in it, and said, gee, how much radiation in a half an hour before it raises the temperature of that gel? Well, what has that got to do with human biology and all of our neurons and everything going on inside of a human brain? Nothing, nothing to do with that. They only went off of heat. How much heat to raise the temperature of the gel? So those are the FCC limits that we've been stuck with since 1996 as the industry rolled more and more and more and more of this out in our society. But hey, they're good guys, right? So you scroll down a little bit further and it says to reduce your exposure, basically, once you know you're radiating yourself, don't touch it. To reduce your exposure, use a hands-free option. And they suggest using the headset that your device came with or a speakerphone. So one of the properties of this man-made radiation is it amplifies around metal, as Ken explained. And when we have a wire going from a radiating device like a wired headset and going up into our brain, basically, that's not safe. Earbuds, you have a microwave transmitter on both sides of your head, and then you've probably tucked a radiating device, the phone, on your body somewhere. That's not safe. But for everything that we've broken, again, we know what to do and we know how to fix it. So if you do have to use a cell phone, we teach how to use it more safely. That cell phone comes with a different antenna for every different service they are offering us. Cellular and data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot, 5G, and any others that your particular device might come with. Each one has a separate antenna mounted that's going, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Here I am, trying to make a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And today's message is not no technology, but let's learn to use it safely. So we teach people only turn on the one antenna for the shortest amount of time you can get away with and keep everything else in full airplane mode, right? If you have to work with a phone, put it in airplane mode, set an alarm. Everything that's on your device, your clock, your alarm, your cameras, anything you've downloaded for entertainment or apps, once they're on there, you don't need those antennas radiating for it to work. So we ask folks to just consider, let's try and get to as low as reasonably achievable. That's called the ALARA principle. As low as reasonably achievable. That's what our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, recommends for when we're using radiation. So they want us to create as much distance as we can from something that's radiating. They want us to spend as little amount of time radiating ourselves as we can. And if we can't get away from something that's radiating, they want us to learn how to shield. And that you would do with a professional because, as Ken learned the hard way, there are some caveats with shielding. So if you have to use a cell phone, turn off all the antennas but the one that you're using, and then look for something, use speakerphone if you can, but if you need a headset, look for something called a hollow tube or an air tube headset. See how it's just got rubber? There's no metal going up around your ear because metal amplifies radiation. So look for the hollow tube or air tube headsets. They've got literally a hollow tube like a doctor's stethoscope. You can hear really well through it, but there's no metal going up to your head. And these little ferrite beads break the radiation but carry the audio signal. And then it's got a nice long cord on it so you can put your radiating phone far away from you and you still have, volume control and muting and all that fun stuff. So again, everything we've broken, we know how to fix. So what the solution is, and I'll give you a graphic for this in a little bit, but literally, folks, on the back of your router, you've got Ethernet ports. Just go find your Ethernet cables again, and you can buy little adapters. This is, the one for the iPhone. You just plug in an Ethernet adapter to the Ethernet cable, and then you plug it into your device on the other end, right? So it's not rocket science to fix. It's just a huge mind shift from all Wi-Fi all the time and all the convenience that we've been sold at the expense of our health and our environment. So again, we'll keep teaching you this stuff, but I want to give you a demonstration because when I first came into this, I had a really hard time getting my head around something that was invisible, right? How do we even know it exists? And then I learned that there are scientific devices kind of like a Geiger counter, but this is actually for low-level, non-ionizing, non-thermal microwave radio frequencies. This is the device that was recommended at the EMF medical conference, and I know doctors who have put them into circulation in their medical practice. We've got Dr. Erin Acevedo up here on the North Shore in Massachusetts. She loans hers to her patients for $10, so they take it seriously. They share the cost. It's a $400 meter. And then she says, you've got 2 hours. Go home and do your scavenger hunt. Write down what was radiating and at what levels, and then come back and we'll teach you how to mitigate. So this is the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, and we'll have a link for you for this in our slides. But I want to show you what happens with this technology. So when I turn it on, you see the lights all glow, and then it dropped down to green with just a little bit into the yellow. And right now, the maximum spike of radiation that we've got in here is 6. So we're at 6 microwatts per square meter. So basically, in 3 feet of air, how much radiation are we getting? We're getting 6 in my home because I've already mitigated. The science wants us to be at 10 or less. They think our bodies can clear that kind of toxicity overnight when we sleep if we are at 10 or less. So let me take my cell phone out of airplane mode. And when I say airplane mode, that means not only turning airplane mode on, but also turning off in your settings the Wi-Fi antenna and the Bluetooth antenna, because if they say on or not connected, that means they're still over there going, hello, 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 here I am, I want to connect. They're just not connected with something, but they're still radiating. So make sure we go into full airplane mode. And now I'm taking airplane mode off, and those antennas are all coming online. And now I'm in this screaming, flashing red, which is, it just topped off my meter. I'm going to go back into airplane mode, and we can watch it dissipate as those signals try and find their way out of here. So I'm back down to the green, but this meter holds on to the maximum spike of radiation that just came through. So we were at 6 microwatts, and in the science, they want us to be at 10 or less. And just by turning on this single device, we went to 3,180,000. 3 million, and we want to be at 10. So that's what has come to be in our living areas and what we can baby step by baby step learn how to mitigate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and resume my screen share. And again, folks, we're going to be sending you all of the recording and all of the slides so that you can, take bites, digest some, make little changes, and then come back and keep learning with us. So that was the Safe and Sound Pro 2. There's a link there so you can go to Safe Living Technologies. They do have a baby sister one that's less than $200. And their tech support is really good. So if you have questions about meters or shielding or any of that, they're really good. Rob Metzinger founded that company, Safe Living Technologies, and he is one of the instructors. He's also an engineer, but he's one of the instructors with the Building Biology Institute. So you're in really good hands. So my brain goes towards solutions. When I found out that there are radio frequency radiation detection meters, I thought, wow, let's get one for our schools and let's get one for the library so everybody can just go measure, do their gap analysis, and then address it, right? Sounds so simple. But nobody had heard of this issue. And so it took me 3 tries before I was granted $400 to put 1 meter on loan in our public library. I had to individually go and educate our select board, and I had to go educate our health agent, and then I had to go educate our public library directors. And Ultimately, though, after 3 rounds of submitting my grant application, we did become the first in the nation to put a radio frequency detection meter on loan in our library. And others around the country have said, hey, that's pretty cool. I think we'll see if we can get one for our library too. And that was back in 2016 before the pandemic, before we handed everybody a tablet to go home and study with in our schools, and before people started putting all their reading materials on their devices. So today, libraries are having to reinvent themselves to keep it, keep people from the community coming in. So most of our libraries have started a library of things collection. And I know that our library has games and puzzles and a metal detector and a projector and all sorts of cool things that you can just go borrow from the library. So it's not a big ask today for you to go to your library and say, hey, can we get a radio frequency meter to put on loan? When the utility companies were rolling out their CFL light bulbs, those swirly, squirrely ones that actually throw off another bad form of man-made energy, those are not healthy for us either. But one of their marketing campaigns was to put a kilowatt meter in our libraries so people could take it home, measure how much their incandescent healthy light bulbs were using versus how much these energy savers are going to cost us every year. So that's where I even got the idea, is that the industry had already put a meter on loan in our library to measure kilowatts. So we became the first in the nation to have a radio frequency meter. And if your library has budget, they probably won't mind at all getting one of these. If they don't have budget, we invite you to reach out to our friends at the Environmental Health Trust, and they have a grant fund with a discount that your library can get if the librarian contacts them. Not citizens, but the librarian has to contact them. So again, solutions at every turn, you guys. Okay. So let's talk about what actually is wireless radiation and why should we even care about it. What happened when we went from these corded forms of communicating to all of this wireless stuff? Well, it comes down to these electromagnetic fields. The Earth in our natural environment pulses these beautiful healing electrons up from the Earth 7.83 times a second. That's called Schumann resonance, and that's measured in hertz. So just shy of 8 times a second. Everything on the planet is meant to be connected to this healing energy from the Earth, right? But what happened when we got so fancy with man-made energies, we started shoving 1 million spiked erratic pulsations into every second. 1 million times a second, our biological cells are getting hit with these spiked erratic pulsations of microwaves. And now, as industry pushes us off into 5G, 6G, and beyond, they're starting to use these other frequencies in the gigahertz range. And now they put 1 billion pulsations per second. 1 billion times our biological cells are getting jackhammered with microwaves. So, in a word, Dr. Martin Blank out of Columbia University and his son R came up with this book some years back called Overpowered, and our biological cells get overpowered by all of this man-made radio frequency unless we learn enough to give our bodies a break so that we can begin to heal during the sleeping hours. So you're welcome to look at that book, Overpowered. And last year, R. Blank came up with a sequel to this called Empowered. How do we empower ourselves and our families to live compatibly with technology, but without so much exposure and harm? So again, resources for us at every turn. So what does the science tell us? We'll look at the long-term effects first, and child and adult cancers. So for many years, the industry got away with saying, oh, there's no mechanism of harm, it only comes down to heat, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, more than 2 decades ago, our National Toxicology Program, which is part of the National Institutes of Health and National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, they began a study that went on for 20 years to see what would happen if we exposed the rodents to cell phone radiation. They went in expecting that everything would be fine. At the end of the day, what they discovered is clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. And the industry will get a hold of these good studies and go, that's just one study. You need to have more than one to prove anything. Well, right on the heels of our $30 million cell phone study, the largest that this world-leading toxics research organization has ever done on any toxin, right after we find out it's carcinogenic, causes cancer and DNA damage, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy completed another multi-million-dollar study on cell tower base stations. So they found the same thing that we did: DNA damage, cancers. And the World Health Organization back in 2011 looked at this issue, and there was enough science already done. We didn't have the rodent studies yet, but there was enough science already done to warrant precaution. And they classified this man-made radiation as a group 2B possible human carcinogen. Now that the animal studies are complete and other studies, many other studies have been done since then, we now know it is a human carcinogen and should be upgraded to probable human carcinogen, if not known human carcinogen. So just in the last few months, the World Health Organization partially funded another study, and they published this to say high certainty that this indeed is causing cancer. So we don't need more science. We need to stop playing the political games and get the public informed and start taking control of our own technology environment. DNA damage. So that is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, from a human to a plant to a pollinator to a tree to a biome to bacteria. If we're damaging the DNA, we can understand why we're seeing such fallout in our society. It was the infertility studies that really caught my attention when I started reading them. They've taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating. That changed the DNA. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused programmed cell death or apoptosis. It was killing off the sperm in just 4 hours of exposure to this man-made radiofrequency radiation. So that was the day that I went, you've got to be kidding me. We got to do something about this. So that's when I started the conversation with my schools that ultimately led me to talk to our legislators and ultimately led me to be here with you today to try and teach what's going on here. And it's not just male fertility. We now have an amazing study out of Kaiser Permanente that's never been challenged, that shows higher miscarriage rates for women. So lots of reasons to start taking this very seriously. And then the neurotoxicity. Even pre-pandemic, we were already at epidemic levels of anxiety, depression, anger, suicidal ideation like we've never seen before with adults and children. And so Dr. Martha Herbert, who founded the Autism Lab at Mass General Hospital, she is a Harvard pediatric neurologist. She's retired now, but still actively working on things. She discovered, with all the science we have on autism, that the patients she had in her care were showing symptoms of microwave radiation poisoning, if you will. And she knows that it's, a layering of effects of all these environmental exposures, the food chemicals, the air quality, the water quality. We hit a tipping point, and that can often lead somebody to tip into the autism spectrum. Dr. Hugh Taylor is the head of OB/GYN at Yale Medical. And Dr. Taylor and his colleagues did these rodent studies where they exposed pregnant mice to this man-made radiation from a cell phone. And when the pups were born, they started exhibiting behaviors much like a child with attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, bouncing off the walls of the cage, not a care in the world, can't focus. And then Alzheimer's, Dr. Martin Pall, Pall again, has looked into the work of Dr. Pal Patcher and others and come up with a good paper on neurotoxicity as well, that Alzheimer's used to start showing up in our 80s or 90s, but now we see it in our 70s, our 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, and even in rare cases in our 20s. We cannot continue to pollute the environment of the brain with these microwaves and expect that we will have the outcomes that we once had. And, one of the biggest challenges is that mainstream media is by and large paid for, if not outright owned, by these big, powerful industries who have the control to keep this information out of the public eye. So we're very, very grateful when well-known environmental groups figure this issue out and get funding to put resources on it. And as a mom, I learned about the Environmental Working Group because every year they put out their Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen list with regard to pesticides in our foods, what foods you can probably buy conventionally without eating too much of the toxic chemicals, and which foods you should really try and get organically. So I already had very high regard for the environmental working group. But they too have come up with some fact sheets. So know your audience. If you know somebody who's already a fan of EWG, pull up these fact sheets. Maybe that'll get their attention in a non-threatening, supportive way. So here's a couple of the ones they offer. The effects of radio frequency radiation on the nervous system, and protecting kids from wireless radiation in schools and at home, because our children are not little adults. They're still under construction. Their immune system is still developing. Their central nervous system is still developing. Their brains are still developing. And with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and colleagues, they have done the modeling of how much radiation absorbs into our brains. So these heads are turned sideways. The little yellow dot is the ear. And when a fully formed adult puts that cell phone up to their head, it penetrates the brain about a third of the way through. On a 10-year-old's thinner skull with higher water content, that radiation permeates about 2/3 of the brain. And on a little 5-year-old skull, it's microwaving almost the entire brain. So we have to learn about this and step up and speak up politely, but fact-based, and address this in our communities. So in the short term, a lot of people will come back and say, Cece, I didn't want to know this. I don't want to believe it. But I'll be darned if I didn't recognize some of these short-term effects already and mitigate it. And then all of a sudden, these symptoms are no longer or have vastly improved. So please know that the Americans with Disabilities Act has long since recognized electromagnetic radiation as a harm. And they even offer, the Jobs Area Network, or JAN, they even offer accommodation recommendations for work. So, but again, we never hear about it. So what are some of the short-term issues that you or loved ones or colleagues may be facing? Insomnia. And again, for years, the industry said, there's no mechanism of harm identified, so let's keep doing what we're doing. Well, now we know about infertility. We know about cancers. We know about neurotoxicity. And we know about insomnia. So we are beings of light. We run off of our 24-hour circadian clock. And in the wee hours of darkness, our pineal gland is supposed to release melatonin when it gets signaled that it's dark out, release the melatonin that then goes in and helps to regulate our sleep. But another important job of melatonin is to detoxify the body from everyday cell repair and the debris that gets left behind. Unfortunately, the brain cannot differentiate between natural daylight and this man-made light energy form of radio frequency microwave radiation. So the brain's over there going, hey, when's it going to get dark so I can release the melatonin? So if we are dysregulating our own biological rhythms, it explains a lot why a lot of people don't sleep right anymore. And then headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds or ear bleeds even. Fatigue, you're just so wiped out, you can't get your groove back. pain from unidentified sources. So there's something going on here that's now well documented in the science. Dr. Magda Havas started under her, high power professional lab microscope and could see that when we exposed our red blood cells to this man-made radiation, it started causing oxidative stress. Our red blood cells are supposed to float around like these nice little ovals or circles, individually repelling one another. So each little red blood cell can go where it needs to go to bring oxygen. Under her microscope, she saw a couple of things that were happening. These sweet little oval and round shapes were starting to look like bottle caps. It's like they were getting, dried out or something. And then because it's an electromagnetic field, they were magnetizing to each other and sticking and clumping. And then this clump of deformed red blood cells couldn't properly get to bring oxygen to all of our systems and organs. Now that's something called rouleau formation. In my little brain, it sounds a lot like the candy Rolos, that stack of caramel chocolates. Well, try and picture that trying to get through all your tiny little vessels and stuff. So rouleau formation is happening, and Dr. Rob Brown and others just published a recent study. He's a radiologist, and he was able to use his equipment in the body. So Dr. Havas took the blood out of the body. He used the equipment to see through the veins on the back of the leg after exposed to a cell phone what happened. And it showed that rouleau formation too inside the body. So the science just keeps getting stronger and stronger. So skin abnormalities. The science also lets us remember that we have little antennas in the surface of all of our skin, which is our biggest organ. And the industry will say, oh, these new 5G millimeter waves don't go very deep. They only go in through the skin. Well, I'm sorry. Our skin is our largest organ and it's connected to every other organ in the body. Our cells communicate with each other all day long. So what some people experience when they've been overexposed to this man-made radiation, some people will talk about the hot ear that they get after talking on the phone. Others will talk about skin rashes, flushing, heating, tingling, burning, itching. So our poor little cells are going, hello, hello, that's not so good for me. Let's stop that now. And then heartbeats, all of these, our brain, our heart, these are big electrical organs. And when we overpower them, we see irregularities. Depending on your own individual proclivity, maybe it makes your heartbeat too fast or somebody else's heartbeat too slow, or it gives you arrhythmias and palpitations, or maybe it feels like somebody's sitting on your chest and you can't quite get your breath. And it can also, affect high and low blood pressures there. Cognitive impairment, where we just can't think straight anymore. Well, we're microwaving our brain. And then one of the most heartbreaking lectures, or a couple that I listened to at the EMF medical conference, was when the doctors were saying, if we don't get ahead of this, we can well expect to see more and more of these societal outbursts like we've had with these mass shootings and other anger outbreaks. I remember here in Boston, when the kids were sent back to school with their tablets after they'd been homebound for all those months or years, in 1 week, in 3 different districts in Boston, there were news reports of these kids losing their mind at school and literally wailing on their classmates with these tablets. So folks, it's not if this is going to happen, this is happening. We just have to understand that this is one of the mechanisms behind why we're seeing all these changes in behavior and health. So there are organizations all around the world working on this, and there's one over in France that started World Electromagnetic Radiation Syndrome Day, or EMRS Day, or Electrohypersensitivity Day. It used to go by a lot of different names. Now there's been an effort to unite everything and call it Electromagnetic Radiation Syndrome. So these folks in France started a day to feature the people who have been harmed by this and to tell their stories. And then people who are working on this, people who are working in the legislature, people who are working in the courts, people who are working in our towns, to offer inspiration. And we generally ask people to write their experience in 2 minutes or less so that we can get, about 20 people telling what this disease is. So feel free to click on that if you want to hear more from people who have been actually injured and some encouragements on inroads to help us. But again, folks, our children should not be exposed to this any longer. So my big head scratcher was, if this is as bad as little me could find just by going to read the science, why don't we know? And then I started in 2012. In 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came up with this incredible free online report called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries it presumably regulates. So think about that. Our federal agencies have been dominated by the industry. And notice the graphic they put on the cover of their Captured Agency report. It's a revolving door. And that is what many of our agencies in the last couple of decades have become, is a mouthpiece for industry to get their profits at the expense of public health. So that's free and online, so you're welcome to look at that. And then when we did that $30 million study with the National Toxicology Program, that should have triggered public policy to protect you and I. But, that study was started more than 20 years ago. And so all those people who were qualified on this subject are long since retired or passed away. And at the time that that National Toxicology Program study came out showing cancers and DNA damage, there was a new gentleman at the helm of radiology at the Food and Drug Administration that commissioned that study. Well, he didn't commission it, but he inherited it. And when it came out showing clear evidence of cancerous tumors, you know what he did? He went over to colleagues at the FCC and said, we don't really believe that. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. What would ever possess Dr. Jeffrey Shuren to do that? So then you go looking into his background and you find that he's married to a woman, or was at the time, who represented a law firm. She was a partner in a law firm that represented big everybody: big Wi-Fi, big telecom, big tobacco, big agri, big pharma, big food. So these conflicts of interest, unfortunately, go all the way up to the World Health Organization. You wouldn't know it if you do a quick search. You'll still come up with something from the WHO that said, oh, it's still inconclusive, let's keep doing what we're doing. But it won't bring up the links to show that they have reopened their investigation. And they have said, okay, cancer's already coming through the courts, but what about all the other things, like the impact on children, the impact on the environment, the impact on the elderly, because our own cognitive abilities naturally do a slow decline, and this is really exacerbating that for a lot of people. And what about the birds, the bees, and the trees? So the WHO reopened this investigation, but unfortunately, there are two groups at the WHO. One was the bona fide scientists and doctors who have the career lifetime expertise to weigh in on this. And the other group was set up by industry. And it looks like this investigation has been captured once again. So that's why we don't know, and why we need to just take things into our own hands, get to a comfort level with the knowledge and the science, and then start taking action. So do your scavenger hunt. Start noticing what you traded wires in for a wireless component. And just know that with the Internet of Things, they're putting these antennas in everything, every electronic that you can buy today. The industry is telling us that we're all going to have 200 wirelessly connected devices radiating in our homes that are throwing our data out there and capturing it. And it's not great. 200 wirelessly connected devices, and each device likely has multiple antennas. So it's all of our smart tooth things, all of our smartphones, our Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, the routers, the cordless phones, the wireless headsets, the tablets, laptops, and printers, mice and keyboards, gaming devices, and please don't put virtual reality right back up to your brain or a child's brain. The baby monitors that we're tucking right in next to the baby, that's like a little cell tower right next to your little developing pumpkin there. Smart hearing aids, again, just like the earbuds, putting a microwave transmitter up to the brain. So, in all the wearables, right? You think you're doing something to monitor your health, but you're giving with one hand and taking away with the other with a microwave transmission right on your body. So, again, we teach you what to do, right? Let's look at this. So, as I showed earlier, on the back of your router, you have an Ethernet port. Just get your Ethernet cables back, right? And if you have to buy new ones, look for something that says shielded. That just means the cable itself has a foil liner in it so that the electric and magnetic field don't bleed out into your living space, because for some people that makes them sensitive too. So get a big long Ethernet cable, plug it into your router, and then most of us have more than one device we want to hardwire. So you just go and get an Ethernet switch. This is one that I've got. It's got 5 ports on it, little tiny thing, right? Nothing too intimidating. You plug it into the wall for electricity, and then you plug in your main cable from your router, and then you can split it off to your devices. So it's like a splitter or like an extension box for electronics. So just get a little Ethernet cable for each one of your devices, sort out which adapter you need, and then plug it in, right? Same thing with your tablets, with your laptops. Plug it in, your printer, cable up everything. So the first step is to hardwire it. The second step is to go into all of your settings and turn off those antennas. And you can do it right here on your router too. I called my internet service provider and said, hey, I've chosen to hardwire my home for safety and for the much better speed and the far more reliability of signal. And all my data isn't being buckshot out through the air to be captured by somebody with, nefarious reasons for wanting my data. So lots of reasons why hardwiring is superior. Convenience is the one you will give up because you can't walk around with it. Although I have a 40 or 50-foot Ethernet cable that I can drag from my living room to my kitchen to my front or my back porch and my dining room. So it's just shifting the mindset. So first you hardwire, then you go into the antennas. And when I called my internet service provider and said, I've hardwired everything, but that thing that came in with the service, the triple play box, the router, is still radiating heavily. How do I make that stop? And they said, easy, just sit down at your computer. And I went, really? And they said, yeah, hop on your computer. We'll walk you through how to get into your account. And then they took me right over to the wireless settings, and it had a 2.4 gigahertz antenna. It had a 5 gigahertz antenna. It had a 2.4 gigahertz antenna hotspot on it and a 5 gigahertz antenna hotspot on it. And so I just went off, 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 off. And I hit the apply button and it said, you realize you're cutting off everybody's wireless? And I went, yes, thank you. And then I just waited a minute and I waited for it to dissipate. And then I measured again and I got my house mostly into the green. So I did actually, that was the first time. And then my partner had found a better deal with our internet service provider and said, hey, we'd like to switch over to you guys, but my wife's going to want to make sure that there's no radio frequency when you're done doing the switch out. And they said, no problem. So they came and spent half a day switching out the 3 different, cable boxes and stuff that we had, their modem. And I said, okay, guys, just humor me. And I brought my meter down to the utility closet and I measured and it went off the charts. And I said, okay, so you turned off the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz antennas, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, and what about those hot spots? I understand you guys put hot spots on the router in my home that's eating up my energy bill for you to be able to throw signal out to the street from my device, my router, so that your customers can maintain a connection while they're driving by my neighborhood, which seems kind of unethical. But they said, no, 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 we turned off the hot spots. I said, well, why is it still radiating? And they said, well, I don't know. And they fiddled around a bit. They called their tech support. They didn't know. And so the guy left and he said, well, I'm going to bring my supervisor back tomorrow. And I said, okay. And I had remembered sitting at lunch at the EMF medical conference. I was at the other end of the table from Peter Sullivan and Rob Metzinger and Jeremy Johnson. And I was in one conversation, but I heard a little something about there's an extra antenna in there. So I reached out to one of those guys and I said, hey, what was that extra antenna? And they said, your box came pre-equipped with a radiating antenna for the home security system. And I went, oh. So we went out that night and bought our own router. And when the internet service provider came back the next day with his manager, he didn't know what it was either. And I said, I think I figured it out, guys. I said, there's an antenna in here that's still radiating that your first line help desk does not know about. So I've been advised that you have to go to the tier 2 tech support person, which gets you to an engineer that can go deeper into the system and actually shut that thing off from their end. So that's what I had done. And I was able to show them a clean, green reading. And I said, so how about this? As a show of good faith, would you just take my new router that I just went and bought and swap it back out? And they said, absolutely. And they were so nice. So they left, they learned something, I learned something, and I had my house under control. So you have to be able to hardwire to turn off all those antennas, but it's critical that you get a hold of a meter to measure with because again, they're slipping these antennas everywhere. They put one in the new stove that we bought and it was radiating at 1,090,000. My smart television set, I plugged it in with an Ethernet cable thinking that would do the trick, but it was still radiating at 40,000, which is why I took it down to the local tech guy and said, hey, Brendan, will you open up my TV? Can I pay you to just disable whatever's in there? And that's where he just pulled this little antenna off of the motherboard. So it's all doable. It's intimidating as all get out when we first learn about this. Although some techies might be excited about it, they like a challenge, but it is doable. So this is what you and I can start doing today to stay connected and protected. But what happens when these exposures come from other places outside of our control? These big cell towers with these macro antennas on them, the 5G small cells that are starting to be installed in our neighborhoods at bedroom height, right outside where we sleep. They're putting all this stuff on our kids' schools. They're tucking them up into church steeples saying, hey, we'll give you a revenue stream if you let us put this equipment here. And hey, you're going to get a much better signal. Well, odds are there was no gap in signal to begin with. They are just pushing this new technology because they want to use these new frequencies for 5G, but these new millimeter waves are smaller than the longer waves from the bigger antennas. And they still have to use the big antennas for the backbone to carry the smaller waves to your devices. So they've added a whole nother layer of toxicity with 5G. And they're aiming to put these every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhood, right in our public access way at the curb outside of bedrooms, and people are getting very sick. Now they're now they're launching thousands of satellites up into the sky to beamform down to your 5G equipment, you know? And then all of these wireless access points that have been mounted on the ceilings in our children's schools, in our town halls, in our libraries, in our offices, these pulsate 24/7 until we know better. If you flip these puppies over, there's Ethernet ports on the back side. So everything runs through wires from the street into your building, into your tech systems, and it's all hardwired. It's just this last little bit that connects directly to your devices. So there's Ethernet ports on the back. You just drop a wire down to task level and plug it in. In a classroom, you could drop the wire down, put in a big Ethernet switch that has 20 or 30 ports on it, and all the devices in the classroom can be hardwired, turn off the antennas, measure, and you're good to go. And now we're going to talk about these utility smart meters that we do not have informed consent on, and we don't have control over the radiation. So I'll give a very quick overview of what these things are, and then Ken will be able to walk us through what the real details are. So most of these pulse microwave radiation 24/7. This radiation, again, it amplifies around metal, so it can hop on the house wires and pipes and literally turn your house into one giant radiating antenna if it's not properly done or grounded. It can cause fires and explosions, and we have reports from all over about these fires and explosions. And it's not like you can just call your fire department and they come hose you down. You can't put a hose on an electrical fire because it's going to arc and it's going to electrocute the firefighter holding that hose. So when there's an electrical fire, they then have to contact the utility company that has to then get into their system and shut everything down from their end before you can start addressing the fire. And that could take up to an hour. And if you've got a windy day and your house is ablaze, it's going to be bad news. And you better make sure that you've got a rider on your insurance policy for these smart meters too. So when we have smart meters and the smart grid, or even just the digital meters, their data is now airborne. It's being buckshot out into the air, which throws your information right out there for anybody to be able to capture. And then they will have your data and they'll know your routines and your patterns. Oh, look, this whole family's gone by 8 o'clock in the morning. Let's back up our trucks, take all their goodies, right? So really, really not cool. And then the other heartbreaking thing at the EMF medical conference was when the medical doctors were saying that when these smart meters go in or cell towers go up close by, or small cell antennas as they call them, they are a leading cause of sudden onset electromagnetic radiation syndrome, or EMR syndrome, because you'll get a giant dose or a consistent dose over time. So either way is a bad pathway. And then there's also the whole environmental justice issue where these industries roll into town, where you have underprivileged, where you have people who may not have English as their first language. They may be working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their head, so they're not tuned into what's going on around them. And like National Grid did here in Worcester, they came in and rolled out their pilot program for the smart grid, no informed consent, and people started getting sick. And then they turned around and said, hey, this was so successful, we're going to roll it out all across Massachusetts. And hey, New York, hey, Rhode Island, you guys should get on the bandwagon too, right? So this is a huge environmental justice issue as well. And Jeremy Johnson, who I mentioned at the EMF Medical Conference, he is a Silicon Valley engineer. And he did a really good TED talk on these smart meters because a bank of them went up on his condo. And he and his medical doctor wife got so sick so suddenly, and nothing in her medical background could prepare them for what this was. But they figured out it coincided when that bank of smart meters went in. So Jeremy gives a really good science-based TED talk here. And then Dr. Alexia McKnight is down in Pennsylvania, and she is actually a radiologist. She is a large animal veterinarian radiologist, and she does another really good TED talk about when the smart meter went in on her home. She became so neurotoxic that she had her daughter in the car coming home from dance, and there was a green light, and Lexi could not remember if that green light meant stop or go. Thank goodness she made the 50-50 gamble and got home safely, but that's how quickly and how badly these smart meters can take somebody down. Okay, so now I am very proud to bring on Ken Gartner, who is going to walk us through what these meters are, a little bit of technical information, hopefully not too overwhelming, but just to tell us the history of how they evolved and where they got us today. So Ken, please join us.
All right.
And I will shift into the background.
Right. Thank you, Cece. So you want to forward the slide a little bit.
Sure.
Right. So there are several kinds of electric meters that we've had in the past. When we're talking today, we talk a lot about electric meters, but there are also water meters, and there are, uh, excuse me, water meters, gas meters. There are propane meters. There are meters for everything. Anything that can be measured is going to have a meter. And I'm going to just focus here for electric, but it's expandable to all the others. So we've had analog meters for decades and decades. We never thought about it. 20, 30 years ago, you told me we'd be talking about power meters as anything interesting. That would be crazy. Electromechanical meters are a an advance on the analog meter in that they often have a little device added to broadcast the information periodically. Very keep silent all the time, except when a meter reader truck would pass by once a month, twice a month. It was innocuous. We had them for decades. We still weren't talking about them. But then we had this automated meter reading, the AMRs. This is maybe 15 years plus or minus ago. This was a way to not have to have meter readers, to actually don't have the trucks, just have the meter constantly announcing how much usage information was going on, and it would wend its way over to the utility by some infrastructure that's along the road, things captured, things forwarded. Nobody would have to think about it, and you wouldn't have to keep those meter readers on staff. And now we've had one more evolution, and that would be the AMI, the advanced metering, the smart meter, where we're now bidirectionally sending our information and receiving control information from the utility, for for example, maybe to shut down power if someone hasn't paid the bill. Um, but it could also change billing rates. It could information that's sent might not just be your usage information, but it might be how you use, which devices you have, um, other kinds of information. The utility may say, you know what, we're having a low energy day. We need to pull energy out of all of the charging electric vehicles that are still connected to the grid to help us avoid a brownout. There are a lot of things that can be done once you're connected up with a bidirectional technology, and that isn't even saying what happens when the bad guys get involved. We're going to talk about non-broadcasting opt-out meters. This is what we want in Massachusetts. They could be of any flavor as long as they don't radiate energy. They're not broadcasting. All right, yes.
Okay.
So how do we know that the smart meters are harmful? Um, was it due to careful testing by manufacturers that revealed this? No, it wasn't. How about careful testing by those regulatory authorities, even at a municipal or government? No, it wasn't. People voicing their illness to their doctors? Yes, that's a very common cause. People testifying about their illness to local government? Yes. People responding to surveys with supporting details of how smart meters seem to be implicated in their health downfall and then recovery when the smart meter was removed. Yes. And finally, researchers identifying harmful aspects of some meters. Yes, again. So here, authorities from the top down, this is not where this is coming. This is coming from anecdotal and experiential information. It's actually happening. I work with many people who are ill. They're either ill from a smart meter, maybe it was the straw that breaks the camel's back, or it's particularly injurious compared to all the other things. If I had a nickel for every time someone said, "But I can use a cell phone fine, but now I can't do anything since that smart meter went in, or we moved into a place with the smart meters." You believe what your eyes show you. So smart meters pulse their energies. This is one of their injurious aspects. And this is a spectral diagram. All of the smart meters in America use the same range of frequencies in what we call the 900 megahertz band. And they send out their information maybe once every 15 seconds, once every 30 seconds in a pulse. So it's mostly silent and then has a very strong pulse and then goes silent again. So um, here in this diagram, the green is the background of yes, thank you. The green line going across is the background radiation. It's very low. The yellow is the live radiation at the last second that I was doing a measurement, and the magenta were the spikes that were measured. Each one of those lines is a factor of 10. So 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Those are about 100,000 times stronger than just the background. And those are how the strong pulses come. They emanate. At the bottom of this screen, I'm looking at the historical of the last 10 seconds. Every time we see a horizontal little hyphen, this is some part of a communication that was caught either at this local house or elsewhere in the neighborhood. And it's just evidence of how rigorous and vigorous this smart meter infrastructure is. This is a normal house, and in the course of 10 seconds, I'm seeing four, five, six, seven very bright pulses and dozens of little ones that are probably from neighbors. As Cece mentioned, there are numerous symptoms. In fact, in the chat, I'm going to drop a PDF. I'm going to try to drop a PDF. Okay, one more here. If not, there'll be a link.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
we've
here.
got this here on the slide, Ken.
Yes, I'm just putting it in because I think a lot of people might benefit from it. It's a printable checklist for the most popular, according to testimonial writers, the ones that are the most prevalent symptoms. Cece has already gone through these. They're very serious. I've written it as a sort of checklist, a bingo card. And monitor the people in your house. Monitor these symptoms and I have a total of 80 symptoms and conditions that are exacerbated, as reported by over 500 testimonials I've read from people who said smart meters have really changed the direction of their life. In some cases, people get better. In other cases, they are permanently electrically sensitive to everything that's in our world. Our world is electrical. And it shouldn't be the case that something as injurious as this is just put willy-nilly on everyone's house without any option. That's why we're talking about opt-out being a fundamental human right. So let's go with what's happening in the building. So we have radio frequency emanations from the normal metering infrastructure. A couple of times a minute is going to end with 10,000 times a day. That's just for one meter. You have a water meter, might be doing the same thing. Gas meter might be doing the same thing. In addition to the radiating in through the air, there's also stuff being placed on the wiring of the house because these devices are dirty. All the green technologies are dirty. Anything that converts AC electricity to the DC electricity that runs electronic boards like computers and microprocessors, they tend to be very dirty because fixing it costs extra money and extra components have to be added. So we tend to have a very, very harsh environment. We call that electromagnetic noise dirty electricity, which is a colloquial way of dealing with what's otherwise called electromagnetic interference, EMI. These some meters actually they send their information back to the power company via the wires and don't use radiation. And before you get excited that that's a way to have a no radiation answer, it turns out that those frequencies are so low that the signals penetrate quite deeply into the system, and it's very hard to filter them out. And we'll have this audio hum or buzz some people can notice from vibrating components. It's not frequently issued, but just to be complete, some people do complain about that. Not all smart meters are the same. Not all metering infrastructure is the same. In Europe, a lot of the meters have a connector to which you can attach a coaxial cable and mount the antenna 20, 30 feet away from your living space. That seems very civilized. There are few, if none, that I know about in America that do the same thing. It's a simple thing. They just don't want to solve it. All of the companies that produce this know that their meters are injurious. They just don't care, and they're not obligated to care. This has been reported for almost 20 years now, at least 15 years. So nobody can claim ignorance except we, the people who are victimized by it. But the better kinds of meters are the ones that uh, can have a wired connectivity solution. Even better are the ones like we had 20 years ago that only go off once a month when a meter reader goes by. But we can hope that the opt out is toward the safer end of this spectrum where someone has kind of given a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 level to the injurious aspects of the meter, which is too small to read on the slide, but it'll be in your deck. So we have 10 different gas providers in Massachusetts. We have 45 different electric companies in Massachusetts. And we have more than 300 water authority districts in Massachusetts. Every one of them has picked their own metering infrastructure. So it's Wild West. It's changing all the time. And your options are not guaranteed by law that you can opt out of this. Some people are ill. They're ill for other reasons. And this just adds a stress to their bodies that makes it difficult or impossible to improve their health. You should have a choice, and we don't today. So many of these meters that are fielded, they require you to have to call the various agencies. Every utility is a monopoly. They have very little, you have very little recourse. It's their way or the highway. We've had sad stories of people who said, please, I cannot accept a wireless meter for the water in my house. Please give me an option. Can I send a photograph? Can I do this? Can I do whatever? And they said, nope, no water for you. So that can be denied.
Okay.
So what can we do? We can do nothing, doing nothing but keeping vigilant for signs and symptoms. This is not a great strategy, but it's much better than doing nothing and not paying attention. Don't use if a bedroom is adjacent to the incoming electric system or is right adjacent to a gas metering system or is right above the water metering system in the basement, consider abandoning that room, using it for storage, or your health is more important than some other comfort issues, really. You should absolutely ask and demand for safer opt-out and be very clear when you say opt-out. At the very least, you're talking about one that doesn't radiate microwave signaling energies. You can ask if they can relocate any of the broadcast meters. Many of the water meters have a wire cable. Usually it's put in the top of your basement right underneath your first floor, but an extra 6 feet added to that, popped it out the window, out the side of your house and mounted on the outside is much safer and it can be done. Electric, not so easy, but ask. You can ask if you can upload a monthly photo of your reading. During COVID, that was allowed in many jurisdictions when there weren't meter readers and there wasn't an infrastructure to allow that. I don't think they're going to let you, but the smaller jurisdictions have more flexibility than the inflexible major utilities do. Um, and then there's always the surround or redirect or shield those antennas to protect your living space. You can put shielding around these devices. You can reduce them by a factor of 100 or 1,000 in strength, and they will generally still get their job done. They are overpowered. They're not tuned for what they need to do. They are one size fits all, and it's the strongest, biggest, size 13 triple E shoe size. It's too much. You can consider weaning yourself from natural gas, thus no gas meter. You could do the same. You could drill a well in many places, then have no water meter. Um, you can move your electric meter off your house and put it on a pedestal or a stanchion off the house in the driveway. That'll be at some cost. Have it facing away and then not have to think about some of these issues in the future. Uh, dirty electricity, which is endemic to electric meters only, water and gas don't have their hands wrapped around the electric lines of your house like the electric meter does. But this dirty electricity, this electromagnetic noise that gets impressed on your house, you can take steps to put shielding to remove some or all of that. So, bad news for apartment dwellers, condo dwellers, people who may be in a situation where there's shared housing and say there's a bank of meters right next to their accommodations. I have seen numerous cases where people have become quite ill when 24 meters were all upgraded from relatively safe to a not safe, and that's not safe with one, and they had 24. So pick your housing carefully. Care about the placement. Certainly, the power company doesn't care about your health. They're not going to ask, "Is there a baby on the other side of that wall?"
Mm.
So a lot of people like to cover the meters. So we'll talk about when that's effective. So most of the airborne radiation comes through the meter's cover and is projected forward through the faceplate. Much of it is blocked going backward by the bulk metal of the meter socket itself. But it's a little bit like splatter. It will get in all the ways. Microwaves bounce off things all the time. That's how they work. You can cover that housing with a shield of some kind to reduce emanations in the forward direction, the ones that typically go away from your house. But you're likely to have those emanations bounce back. You basically put a reflective piece of metal, and some of that is going to bounce backward where it hadn't been going backward before. So, you know, you also want to be super careful about the bounced signals getting impressed onto the wiring right there. I have many clients who can feel the wiring with the higher frequency. It emanates as all long wires can be antennas. They pick up things and then they broadcast things. So these energies can be taken from the meter and broadcast hundreds of feet away because they travel on the wiring system. So when is covering shield is a good idea? If your house is L-shaped, so that part of your house is actually seen by the front face, this is a good time to try to work this into your remediation scheme. If that meter is inside your home, then clearly you want to block or reduce as much as you can. If the meter faces a driveway, a patio, garden, someplace where you need or want to spend time, then it's worth putting some kind of cover over that. Or if you have a neighbor that lives very closely and you like and you want to be kind to them. So these things cost money. It's ridiculous that you should have to spend any money to protect your health from something that's been put on your house that wasn't needed for all these years and suddenly it's needed. There's a crime here being caused. It's going to cost you money. So there are many electric meter shields. They can reduce from a factor of 10 to factor of 100, 1,000. As Cece said, Alara, as low as reasonably achievable. If you reduce something by a factor of 10, it may not be enough, but it might be enough. It might be good enough if you're not a particularly ill person, but please make the effort to do something. The cheapest is aluminum mesh screening. You can cut yourself a 14 by 14 piece of this. This is just like a sliding glass window door stuff, not plastic, it has to be metal. You take a hose clamp that they use for HVAC, and as shown in the pictures, uh, you can put that on yourself. Yeah, there it is at the pictures shown on this page. Uh, this is what you would do. I used a piece of paper to simulate, but you could have mesh or a material there. Right. Sorry, thank you. Um, so you could also take one of those adjustable elbows that's used for HVAC and kind of divert without blocking or causing it to bounce back, but to kind of aim it toward the street and aim it away from some populated areas. You can purchase some soft guards. These look like mesh that are on elastic cord. They're usually about $30. They just go over the top. You can have more rigid metal cylinder that goes over. The more rigid it is, the more likely it's going to have a bouncing backwards aspect. So you can put some microwave absorptive materials. You know, we live in the space age, and there are all sorts of materials that are purchasable at depending on your wallet, what you can get, but you need a small piece. Or you can even go premium. There's a $500 kind of um, cover called the Iron Maiden, which is very helpful for some people who've um, ill with even a little bit. Relocating your electric meter can cost 5 to 10,000, depending of your current arrangement. And if you had shrubbery or a driveway, you shouldn't have to go that direction. But your health is the most important thing in your life, the health of your family. You have to really think about it. Wait until you're sick and then spend the money, or spend the money ahead of time and try to prevent getting sick. It is a balance we all have to consider. We should never have to consider, but we must consider to live safely with technology. So, how do we know that we have improved the situation? Because that's the whole point. You measure inside the home, wherever you sit, stand, or sleep. We often will measure on the outside, as shown in these photos, but that is to characterize the meter. That is, exposure outside means almost nothing. It's exposure inside. But the problem is the exposure inside is fairly low, and most meters would have difficulty really hearing more than a whisper. Yet your biology gets entrained. You know, the water drop torture, those drops are not big. They're just constantly entraining the body. And at night, your body is sleeping, and all of your armor defenses are taken down. So even if during the day you can tolerate exposure to things, when you sleep, if you're going through a normal healing cycle, your systems are taken down and you're defenseless. So, and of course, if you have an electrically sensitive person and they report that they feel better, it is job done. It doesn't matter what the meter says. If they are themselves, they are the most exquisite meters around.
Oh, Ken, thank you so much. We are so very grateful that you have your expertise to share with us here. And I'm going to take it back for a little bit um, and continue on for a few more minutes with some solutions, okay, of what we can do. Martin Luther King Jr. gave us hope. He said when things finally start happening right in society, it comes through three channels. One, the public gets involved and gets engaged, which is what we're hoping to inspire today. It goes through the courts, and public policy finally catches up. And we've got some really nice inroads to share with you on all of these. I'll go through them quickly. Feel free to do a deeper dive when you get the slides. But we have solutions, for everybody. The healthcare training is available. Physicians for Safe Technology is another really good website to look at. And for other professionals like engineers, physicians, technologists, architects, etc., when Frank Clegg came down, he's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. When he came and joined us at the NIH for that Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference, there was a call for papers, and he brought together a lot of the scientists and doctors and did this peer-reviewed paper called Building Science and Radio Frequency Radiation: What Makes a Smart and Healthy Building? So know that there are resources for everybody, even in our schools. Our friends Patty and Doug Wood at Grassroots Environmental Education have a national program called Tech Safe Schools. Again, nothing scary, just useful and helpful and spot on. They've got the science, they've got the health implications, and most importantly, they've got mitigation strategies for schools. And then the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition worked with the Environmental Health Trust and others, and actually already developed K through 12 age-appropriate curriculum to teach prevention on cell phones and wireless. Dr. Alexi McKnight and I were brought in to do some teacher professional training on their Health and Wellness Day for their PD, Professional Development Day. So we've already got a 45-minute program built out on that. And then here's that online training course where we can literally train your entire workforce, your entire schools in about an hour online. So with legal, the Federal Communications Commission was made to open up a docket back in 2013 because there was so much science mounting that this was harmful, and they left that docket sitting open for 6 years that experts poured testimony in, that families injured poured testimonies in, doctors, scientists. They left it sitting there for 6 years while they rolled out more and more technology. And then they closed the docket and said, no, the FDA says we don't really need to change our public radiation exposure limits. So yeah, we're good with this. And so they filed that with something called the Federal Register, their determination. Once it was filed in the Federal Register, then that opened up the gates for lawsuits to start happening. So the Environmental Health Trust sued them, along with Children's Health Defense and a number of other parties across the country that all got put into one lawsuit, sued for ignoring 11,000 pages of evidence of harm entered into the public record. And when the judges were presented with these 27 big fat binders of evidence, they're reading through it and looking at the FCC attorneys and going, so tell us again, how did you decide that these 1996 public radiation limits are okay? Well, the FCC said, well, the FDA said it was okay. And the joke is that not one of our federal agencies has ever done the formal review on this man-made radiation. So the courts found the FCC guilty and they remanded it back to them. They found them arbitrary and capricious, and those are all terms I had to go look up. But basically, they sent it back to the FCC and said, you guys just made this up. We need you to justify your current limits or adjust them, hopefully to come into line with the science. And that was such a great day when that ruling came down. But it's now been nearly 5 years and the FCC has done nothing with that court order. And apparently the way things go, this is about the time frame when you can go back and start filing new appeals against this. And so Children's Health Defense and the Environmental Health Trust are reviving all of this right now. But folks, it's going to take years for our government at the federal level to do the right thing. But we have some really encouraging things happening too. Our Massachusetts Board of, our Massachusetts Association of Health Boards has already put 4 pages of legal guidelines in their handbook that is available to all of our towns. And they're already putting cautions in there about these cell towers. And Bobby Orsi, I'm so grateful you're with us here today. Bobby was in the town of Pittsfield, and when Verizon put a cell tower up on top of a neighborhood there that's called Shacktown, when the Shacktown cell tower went up, 17 children and adults got so sick that their town leaders told their Board of Health to investigate, and Bobby led that investigation in Pittsfield. And they spoke to the doctors, they spoke to the scientists, they spoke to the industry expert, this Dr. Swanson, who, when they did their investigation, it turns out he's never published one single paper on radio frequency radiation. His area of expertise is in physics with quarks and so forth. So Verizon was touting around this so-called expert who had no expertise at all. So we were so very grateful that Bobby Orsi led her team in Pittsfield to write an emergency order to bring Verizon to the table and say, please talk to us. Let's sit down. Let's figure this out. There was another commercial property owner in Pittsfield who said, hey, we're nowhere near homes. You can move your tower over here. We don't care. But Verizon does not play very nicely in the sandbox. They took it to the courts and they got an injunction against the Board of Health. So there's been several passes through the courts on this. And right now we're awaiting a decision with the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. They had their hearing in December, and now we're waiting for their ruling, because what we believe is that Massachusetts has very strong and empowering laws for our boards of health. And we believe that jurisdiction lies with the Board of Health, and they should be able to stop this nuisance that is in their community. And you don't even have to go up against the Telecom Act that says, oh, your hands are tied. All that only applies to the siting of the cell tower. Once something is activated and comes live in the community, then we hope that we will be able to reinstate the Board of Health's legal powers to police this and get it taken care of. So there are many lawsuits happening all over the country and the world. So you are more than welcome to go take your time and poke through these at the Faith School in Southborough. For the first time, the courts recognize, yeah, you don't have to have heat from harm. There's a lot of damage going on at the non-thermal level. So each of these cases builds off the previous ones, and there's a lot of good things happening. And then eventually policy catches up. And I mentioned early on that we have had many bills here in Massachusetts for over a decade. In 7 months' time, we got the first law passed in New Hampshire to investigate this issue, and they came out with this groundbreaking report. And subsequent to that, in the president's executive order at the federal level, the MAHA Commission strategy, for the first time ever at the federal level, somebody is saying we have to look at this man-made radiation and the effects it's having on our loved ones, our children, our plants, our birds, our bees. So that gives us hope. But again, that's going to take time, and our kids don't have that kind of time right now. So up in New Hampshire, Rep. Patrick Abrami is an engineer, and he'd never heard any of this either, but he started doing his research and had a major wow moment, like, wow, what are we doing? And then his constituent, Deb Hodgson, who introduced him to this, they hopped in his car in New Hampshire and came down to my kitchen table here in Massachusetts, and we spent the afternoon filling him in on what's going on. And he beefed up this bill he was writing to say, why have Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re and AM Best long since recognized this as a world-leading risk, and they put exclusions in their policies? They won't cover for damages. They're not covered. So that can leave our towns holding the bag on liability. Why does that legal fine print that we went through at the beginning of the program even exist? And why is the FCC ignoring all these studies and only looking at heat effects when there's so much harm documented at the non-thermal, non-ionizing low levels of man-made radiation emissions? And why do we allow 100 times more radiation than certain other countries do? Well, we have the manufacturers here. And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of our personal devices, of the cell towers, and now these smart meters? Why are we ignoring it all? So we got that bill passed into law in less than a year, and then they spent a year investigating, and they came out with this groundbreaking report. And every time they try to take their recommendations and enact new laws, industry comes in with their deep pockets and heavy influence, and they just blow it out of the water. So again, no cavalry coming. The public has to get behind this. So let's talk about smart meters in particular. There was a woman whose husband used to go up on the rooftops like an HVAC person, and he got really sick from the cell towers that were mounted up high like that. And she happened to be the child care provider for one of the powerful senators in Vermont. And he said, look, what do we need to do? And she said, we need to stop these smart meters and give people the right to opt out as a first step. So that's how it happened in Vermont. This powerful senator was talking behind closed doors with industry and said, look, this is what you're going to do. And we have yet to have a champion in Massachusetts step up and protect the public over these corporate interests. But we do have 6 bills in Massachusetts. There are 2 smart meter bills. Senator Barrett went and asked his industry contact about this, and they said, oh, no, economically, you don't want to do this. Well, what about the health? What about privacy, data, security, cost? So Senator Barrett sent that study away, sent that bill to study, but Estela Reyes is a state representative in Jean Lemieux's district, and Jean asked her to introduce a sister bill to that one, and it's still alive. It's due to be reported out on Wednesday. And both of these bills have an emergency preamble on them saying, this is an emergency preamble to maintain public health. We need an emergency law here. And we've been having these bills for 6 sessions, which is 12 years in Massachusetts. So we hope people will take this quick action tonight, tomorrow when you get the slides, and just pop it out there. You just have to fill in your information and send it out to let our legislators know. They'll tell your legislators, as well as the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, that we need them to step up and protect us. So next steps, let's keep learning. For my part, I will continue to do these free webinars every month. We rotate the topics. Sometimes we're talking about schools, the children. Right now we're doing smart meters because we've got these bills. Out in Lee, Massachusetts, citizens brought it up. We were brought in to speak and to provide information at one of their Zoom hybrid meetings for their select board. And they have voted that they're going to bring us in for a live forum in their community next Monday night from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Lee Middle and High School auditorium. So anybody in the public is welcome. And my understanding is that they're going to advertise this Berkshire's wide because everybody's getting these letters from Eversource and National Grid, etc. And then there's an award-winning film called Generation Zapped, 74 minutes. It's available through our library and other streaming services. Great to sit down with friends and loved ones to get an understanding of what this issue is. And we've also screened it at many libraries. We've screened it at our State House. We've screened it down at the National Institutes of Health. Great film to start this conversation. And then with great thanks to Dr. Joel Moskowitz at the University of California at Berkeley and their public health division, I copied a similar thing that he had done with that NTP study that found cancers. And I just came up with EMF points of confusion versus fact. It's nice to have something in hand when you open this conversation that you can leave with people. Others have told me they love this document because it's crisp, it's to the point, you can skim it quickly. And then in electronic form that you can send as follow-up, you can send it live and they can get to all the links. So and then again, if you want to do training in-house, even with your own family, have everyone take this little course and then sit at the kitchen table and talk about it, or have it done as formal training at work. So train your families and everybody. It's quick and it allows you to print out a handy reminder of tips and a certificate of completion for your HR department. So for today, let's aim for that as low as reasonably achievable. And we are here to help you. I love getting out there and educating people because I know we can help someone tonight while everything else plays out in the background. So don't be shy about reaching out and seeing if you can get me on an agenda with your town or bring me in and we'll do a whole community forum. We're here to help. And here's this action step again to support the bills we've got here in Massachusetts. So if by now you're thinking you want to look into that Eversource opt out, it'll cost $42 to get the meter swapped, and then they will require you to pay $34 a month. National Grid's is $33 to swap and $26 a month. Out in California, Sydney Cox has let me know that they have a $10 fee. And if you're low income, then it's a $5 fee, and both of them sunset after 3 years. So what these guys are doing here is unconscionable. We should not have to pay a fee to live safely in our homes with a public utility. So thank you. From our slides, you'll know how to get to us, and we will now open it up for questions and answers. I want to mention, though, that Ken had 4 other really good slides prepared on some other angles to look at for legal aspects. If you decide to go that path, you might take a look at these last 4 slides as well. So I will stop the screen share here. And Ken, have you had a chance to look at the chat to see if there are any questions people would like us to speak to?
Yes, I have. They keep flying off the screen. So I've answered some, but well, someone wanted to know, where'd you get your TV repaired, and how do you find somebody who's willing to open up a 60-inch screen TV?
There's a guy who has a company who says, I can fix your broken phone and electronics. So I called him and I said, would you be so kind as to see what I can do to stop this thing from radiating too? So go to wherever the repair shops are for your electronics.
Another question people had were disagreement that smart meters produce more than just a few pulses per day, because
Mm.
all of the official literature says it only sends 4 pulses a day, and this is all overblown. So I mentioned the SMUD case where there were 190,000 found per day. I didn't have a quick reference to it, but
Yeah, well, I do. So when we were getting ready to prepare to testify before the state level Department of Public Utilities here in Massachusetts, which with great thanks to Helen Walker, Patricia Burke, and Jean Lemieux has been going on for over a decade. I took my Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter. I've got two electric meters, one for solar and one for my house's regular electric. And I sat down on the floor in my dining room where these are mounted outside. And I counted how many times it pulsated. And when I did the math on a 24-hour cycle, it was pulsating my family 17,000 times a day. 17,000 times a day. And for what? To get a bill once a month? And I so appreciated when we were having this conversation with the town of Lee, one of their select board members was astute to say, look, if something breaks, your ratepayers are going to call you right away. That's a poor excuse to be radiating us in our homes, right? So yeah, so that's the answer to that one. It's pulsating a lot.
let's see what other things. Well, we had a lot of quotes from AI about how we're overblowing the issue. So we'll just leave the slide deck to have answered it. You either do research or you don't. I did mention that nobody wants to become electrically hypersensitive, and it is not something that's under your control. Somewhere between 2 and 15% of people, and this is many national surveys where
Mhm.
other countries who care about this, US just doesn't seem to care. We have a lot of industry spin, and a lot of people are mesmerized by that tech speak. They want to watch the cat videos and they don't really care about their health and their kids' health nearly as much as they should. Anyway, between 2 and 15% of people have some kind of demonstrated electrical sensitivity. At some point, it becomes a hypersensitivity, in which case you can't coexist in society hardly at all. So, how fair is that you may no longer be able to live in your house due to a meter that gives you
Mhm.
a monthly usage, drove your health down?
Yeah, and
Besides the pregnant mother with the fetus and the what goes on after that, right? So
yeah, the elderly who are getting Alzheimer's faster and faster.
if
So I
you're
direct
ill,
people.
you want if you're ill, you want the best chance of recovering.
Mhm.
And all of these electronic devices, the smart meter is one that's particularly pernicious, but everything Cece talked about in the first half, these are stressors. If they did nothing other than give you biological stress and disturb your sleep, they are already evildoers. And then they do more than that. They weaken your blood-brain barrier. They do many things that they are cofactors for ill health. You don't need this. So electrical hypersensitivity is life-changing. It is wallet draining. It is everything horrible. And to prevent that, you shouldn't have to work this hard. But we're saying that smart meters for some percentage of this audience and of the population generally, you're going to be surprised. We don't
Mhm.
want you to be surprised. So at least when you start down a path, maybe you can reel it back in with the information that we've had here. That's all I
Yeah.
got to say
So
about
yeah.
that.
And again, I direct people over to Massachusetts for Safe Technology. That's our logo. You know who created that logo for us is a gentleman over in Framingham whose leg was going jiggity, and his doctors couldn't figure it out. The specialists couldn't figure it out. And so he started doing his research on what could be affecting the nerves in his leg. And guess what? He had his cell phone in his pocket right there on that leg all day, every day. And he removed the cell phone and his leg recovered. So he's a graphic artist. And so Chuck was very gracious to develop our logo for us. So,
Mm.
folks, go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology, hit the resources page, and among the first few bullets there, you'll find the printout you can have for the EMF Medical Conference. Because if people don't want to believe this, they might just want to pick a fight with you, and you don't have to fight with anybody, just walk away. But if they truly want to learn, go to the resources page. You'll find the position statement from the International Association of Firefighters, who figured this out back in 2004 because their firefighters were getting sick from the cell towers that industry was putting up right at their stations. So there's a lot of great resources there, but you're not going to hear it in mainstream media. So we have to be the messengers and get that information into the right hands.
Cece, Kate has used the raise hand feature. I think we should
Ah,
reward her.
Kate, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure, thanks. And I'll unmask myself here. So I have two questions. Um, One was, where are the links to info about what kind of data utilities can collect very specific data through smart meters? I just needed to know where the reference is, because I've had people ask me to share that reference.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, Eversource, for example,
Mhm.
Eversource has, I think both Eversource and National Grid have integration with Sense technology, and this is something that is a discernment app that can figure out when you've turned on a hot plate or the stove or your dryer. So basically, they're going to get information like at at 1 o'clock they turned on the dryer, at 2 o'clock they turned on the electric car charger. Um, that's
So
information that we didn't really want them to have, but that's just the basics, and they're proud of that. That's not even
So
hiding it.
where is there a link that I can find that information
So
about
look up.
what they're able to collect?
Well, they're not obligated to tell us what they're collecting. They only tell us what they want us to know that they're collecting.
So how
And
do we
Uh,
know? Like,
Ken,
how can I
do
send
you gave
somebody that
me
resource?
Ken, you sent me a really good email this week
Mhm.
that talked about that hookup with National Grid and Eversource to
R-
that
r-
sensing technology. Maybe you
That's
send
right.
that to Kate as a starting point for her.
All right. So
Kate,
Kate, find my email address in the package that you get. If anybody sends me mail, I can send you answers back on such
yeah,
Yeah,
things.
I think I have your email in another
okay,
stream
good.
with
Okay.
Jonathan Mirren,
Oh
Yeah,
yes. Yeah.
possibly, or Sue O'Rourke.
Oh
excellent.
yes.
Great
Yeah.
question. All
Yeah.
right, nice to see you, Kate. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. I have one more question, because
Sure.
if you want, we do have an action alert that sends a letter to support H3551, the opt-out smart meter bill. I could drop a link in the chat if you want me to, Cece, but I won't if you don't want me to.
Have you connected with Jean Lemieux? Have you spoken
I
to Jean?
I've sent her a letter,
Okay, did
but
you talk to her today?
I haven't had time to talk because I was away all day and just got home before, I
Okay, yeah.
was on.
Strategically, the timing is off because they have to have that filed with the House clerk by Wednesday, and today is Monday night. Um, so their thinking is that we don't want to shift this right now. We just want to get that bill advanced. And if we throw stuff in there here at the 11th hour, that could make them throw up their hands and go, oh, we're just sending this one to study. It's a pain.
Well, I mean, I could,
I know there's no good answer.
right? There is no good answer. I mean, because we've already gotten letters from about 140 to 150 constituents
Hmm.
sending letters today. The alert just went out today.
Okay. Well,
150
yeah, if it's
letters.
already left the gate, go ahead and drop it in the chat here, and everybody's welcome to do the same.
Yeah, because it's an instant. You get to send a letter to ask for this bill to be reported out favorably to everybody on the TUE
Yeah,
committee.
yeah,
So yeah,
good.
I mean, if that's okay with you, I'll drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, can't hurt at this point. The more the
Anybody
merrier.
that's still here who hasn't already written their legislators just gets to say, please, please pass this bill.
Yeah, much appreciated, Kate. Thank you, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Peggy, go ahead and unmute.
Hi. For people that are totally befuddled and head is spinning with advisable, would it help if you had the money to hire a building biologist to come in and just walk through your house and say, here's something, here's what to do, here's another thing, just to give you some direction? Because my head is just flying And Ken, do you do walkthroughs, something like that?
I do. I do this part-time, and I do visit people.
Okay.
We set up things. So as Cece says, living safely with technology, there's a lot. She's just given a lot of links, but what if I or for any kind of building biologist visits you, basically it's like a curated s- subset of the links that are directly related to how you live your life, how you have kids, and what the arrangement of your house is. And mostly we measure lots of stuff and highlight, here's what we got. Here are some solution paths like short term, medium term, long term, and then you have a bit of a roadmap. Some are easy wins. A lot of what Cece mentioned are, how do you put those into practice? Yeah, that's like the whole point of what a building biologist does, is to make the residential area safe. Because I'm part-time, this is not my it may not be my calling in life in any way. I'm not going to do some of the big dollar stuff. So I'm mostly just holding hands and showing things and walking people to a safer place, especially people who are sensitive. I specialize in people who are electrically or chemically sensitive, and how they need to safe in their house.
I would love to have my hand held because I'm flying all I don't know where to start, but I might wait till the deadly meter gets installed and then see how that works. And
That was the first bullet item, but should be vigilant. But after you get the slide deck, look around and you can shoot me an email and we can have
okay,
a back and forth about it. I don't,
thank you. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions at this time? You guys have been great. We're about 15 minutes beyond where we thought we might end, but we're happy to answer questions. Kate, you have another question?
You're on mute.
I want to make sure that other people get to ask questions since you've already answered so many of mine. Does anyone else have a question first?
Lois Jensen has been waving her hand vigorously.
Great.
Hi. My question is, so I'm an opt-out person. Are the meters, are non-communicating meters that Eversource is installing, are they safe? They claim they do not use, they don't have any RF, they don't collect any data, and they don't use a switch mode power supply.
All right. I saw that email stream. This is from Janice, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Eversource has had many false starts, many promises not delivered. If they deliver on what they say, and that's an official person saying it, if they
Yeah.
do that, that sounds great. I don't deal in safe. The name of my business is Safer Housing.
Yeah.
So we can always make things safer. I just can't ever answer anything is safe, just
Do
if,
do you know
but
what,
it sounds like it's a dream. If as described,
okay.
it would be this very
Well,
good.
that's what I was wondering. I mean, if it's fine, that's great. I'm wondering if other people in Massachusetts feel
Nobody
on
has
that.
ever had one installed. I know of nobody. I've got a bunch of people said it's coming, and I said to all of them, please let me know when it arrives. I'd like to know. So
Okay.
I learned from the clients. It's not like we go to a school and learn everything. We got life experience. So if you get it installed, please shoot me an email.
Well, I'm afraid I'm fighting them because I'm saying my existing one, I'm fine. It's not emitting an RF. I'd like to see how it works first. But
Yeah.
also, if it doesn't have a switch mode power supply, is it still a source of dirty electricity?
No, that's the beauty of it. If it runs from batteries like they say it does,
They say
then it
plug it into the socket.
yes, they plug it into the socket, but it doesn't, they said it ran on batteries. So
Okay.
if it runs on batteries like a gas or water meter does,
Okay.
then it doesn't produce dirty electricity that gets impressed on the wires. It would be really top class solution. I disbelieve, I'll be cautiously optimistic. That's as much as I
Okay.
can marshal on that.
So I will say to them, we'll see how it goes, and if it's fine, then I'll let you do it, right?
You have very few levers to wield, but it's if hold on to your one as long as you can, but it's an inexorable force. They will get their way.
I
They're too
mean,
big.
I
So
asked,
steer it to your benefit. So if you can get the opt out, get it. It it probably will not be the it'll probably be okay, as
okay,
my guess.
great. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Kate. And there's one other there with her
It is
hand raised.
Lorraine. I see Lorraine.
Yeah, let Lorraine go first.
Okay, Lorraine, thanks.
Thank you. Two things. One is, Kate, whatever you put on the chat, I couldn't figure out how to cut and paste it. So I just want you to know I couldn't do it. I don't know if other people are having that problem. So
So if you just clicked on it, it didn't go to the link.
oh, okay. I'll try that. The other thing I just want to say is that the meter I currently have is not an analog. I thought it was the one that they're going to replace if you opt out. I've opted out of 5. I'm saying keep what I have, but because I know it's better than the smart meter. But I thought that what I currently have is that opt out meter they're giving. Maybe not. And I don't know if it's battery run or not. How would I know that?
That is one of my questions too, is what's
Okay.
already on for Eversource meters? What's already on my house? It's not,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a smart meter. It is they are able to read it from the
So
street.
if you take a clear photograph where we can see the little letters on the faceplate, there will be little letters for FCC ID.
It
If
does
you
Oh,
say
yeah.
send
that.
if you send a clear photo to me, I will tell you what kind you have.
Great. Thank you.
Great. I already took a picture of mine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, because when I did talk to an Eversource supervisor and I read the language that's on on their website, which I dropped in the chat for everybody. Eversource says if you qualify and elect to opt out, we will replace your current meter with a non-communicating meter. And they also say when you request to not have an advanced meter installed, they will be replacing it with a non-advanced meter. So
Yes, that's frightening. That sentence was the frightening one.
the
And
second one,
the one that says we will replace with a non-advanced meter. That's a random term that they invented. A non-advanced meter could be whatever they were shipping 2 years ago, which wasn't that great. So, but Lois has the best information and a promise from the people in authority that it's going to be pretty good. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed and see if she or someone else gets it installed and we can verify.
well, I never trust what they say, but this is
Good.
what's in writing.
It's a
You
good
can't
plan. Yeah,
trust a darn thing they say.
it's
This
quite
is what
so.
is in writing on their website. So this is the only thing we can hold them to. I mean, they could say anything they want. And I've already
They
had
often do. That's why these laws, we're just trying to get something passed to say, to define what the term opt out means so it isn't all oily about what they're going to do, and that people are entitled to it in all circumstances. And darn it, shouldn't it be free? Well, we get what we can, but why should we have to pay for their choices of harmful infrastructure? There's we talk sometimes about tobacco science as the legal defense of these harmful mega technologies, mega things that they're not harmful. And there was a very fun analogy I heard once, and I'll tell you, it's called the 4-dog defense. And it goes basically like this. If you think of the dog as the dangerous thing, the first defense that they make is uh, my dog doesn't bite, i.e., my technology doesn't hurt you at all. It's a lie. But eventually, enough people have enough scientific research and they say, that's we can't do that lie anymore. That lie's not working. And then they say, well, yeah, my dog does bite, but it didn't bite you. So, yeah, they admit that it's dangerous, but it's not dangerous to you. It'll be dangerous maybe to the workers who work on it, but not to people like you. And then after a while, that lie doesn't work anymore. And then they say, yeah, my my dog bites and it bit you, but it wasn't a big bite. It's a teeny tiny bite. And so, it does hurt you. You did get ill, but it wasn't so ill. And eventually that lie doesn't work. And the final lie is, my dog bit you. You got hurt. Didn't you know any better? Why were you near the dog? You know that dog would bite, right? So it goes back and they're like telling you it's your responsibility. It gets replayed all the time. It's your responsibility, but it's not their responsibility. So just keep your eyes tuned for that.
All right. Are there any other burning questions? Okay. Somebody did comment about sleeping in a shielded canopy. That is definitely a viable option. They're not cheap, but my health is worth it. I purchased one after the first EMF medical conference and I measured the ambient radiation. I'm kind of up on a hill and there's a water tower with a bunch of antennas on it somewhere out there in the offing. And remember, those antennas send signals for miles. So when I measured just standing in my bedroom, I was getting like, I don't know, 40 to 80 microwatts per square meter. And when I go inside my shielded canopy, it's really pretty. It looks like, Knights of Arabia with this gauzy looking fabric, but there's metal inside each thread. And so I brought my meter in there and I was at 0.1 microwatts.
This
So
is how our house is all the time, Cece.
yeah,
0.1 is the advantage of building a microwave oven. It was terrible when we had radiating devices inside, but it does keep the outside away.
yeah, and it does. And I know you guys have certain measures for making sure people don't come into your house with their devices
Oh, yes.
that will
Oh,
harm your
yes.
sweetheart. And,
Yeah.
that's a nice thing. And I don't get a kickback on this meter, but when they upgraded this meter some years ago, they put in a port so that you can plug it in and you can have it literally sitting in your entryway all the time on, not using battery, but plugged into the wall, if you can have your electrical on. And
That's
it
how
will
we have it.
alarm.
Yeah.
It will alarm if somebody walks in and forgets to leave their stuff in the car. So lots of good solutions out there. Be very careful with shielding. Somebody also mentioned shielding paint. And there was a woman here in Hopkinton who got so sick and wound up couch surfing because something in her condo was making her sick. And bottom line was somebody said, sounds like you've got, electromagnetic radiation syndrome. And lo and behold, they had put a bank of smart meters outside her kitchen wall. And so she had heard about those shielding paints. So she painted her whole side of her condo with that carbon black paint and put a pretty color over it. But she didn't work with a professional. So she didn't know, what about the people on the other side of your condo whose stuff is all radiating through your walls and coming in and hitting that carbon black and smacking you back again? you know? So that rebounding stuff is pretty serious. So shield with professionals, talk to folks like, Safe Living Technologies and get the guidance. A lot of them, like the Building Biology Institute, they've got free fact sheets and stuff out there too. So do your research before you try to do any shielding. Okay. All right. Kate, is your hand still raised or are you good?
No, I had one more question, which was just how for your neighborhood, um, I will opt out. I will try to educate my neighbors, but if they don't opt out and the antennas are on the street, what can I do? How far away, if there's a radiating antenna on the street, is that also going to zap me? Are my neighbors going to zap me?
Do you have a meter, Kate?
I do. I have that beautiful meter that
That's That's perhaps how you'll get your answer, but distance is our friend. So Ken may have a rough rule of thumb
On what? Please repeat.
on how far away can a smart meter be from your neighbor before you might start seeing it in your home.
From the neighbor. So a lot of things are people choose for themselves to not have a broadcasting meter. and this is the electric meter. A lot of people have a water meter in their basement that's broadcasting all the time for years, and they're not even thinking about it. But when that gets upgraded to the smarter technology, it might suddenly become a problem. So you already yourself probably have several meters to think about in an opt-out situation. Near neighbors, if you live in a rural area, probably not. But if you live close, it really depends on how it's aimed. I think in the 50 to 100 feet is it will have some impingement. It definitely diminishes as you go. The most important is there's a long and complicated answer, but basically people who share the same electrical transformer with you, which in some dense environments could be 4 or 5 other houses, that electrical energies come along the wires from them into your house. So if they have dirty electricity from meters running on their house or their solar panels, they can enter your house. So we're tied together on many different fronts, not just the airborne stuff. So it's a complicated answer. There is no pat answer. There's nothing that's safer. The further away, the better.
Okay, and just having solar panels on our own roof means we have dirty energy, right?
The people who put those solar panels on your roof did not consider the topic at all. The people who manufacture it did not consider the topic at all. Some are better than others. You don't know what you have. You couldn't ask them what you have. You just basically have to print it all out and then look up all the specs and see how you're doing with it. In general, some people who are sensitive, when we come to their house, it's the solar is pretty hard. By then, they've learned when they turn the solar off, they feel a lot better. That's an indication that it's maybe there are micro inverters on the back of every panel. Some of my clients say that they feel jangly all the times, like their hands are constantly agitated when the solar is operational. That's the kind of thing that clearly too much.
Yeah. Well, one good thing is that our solar installer wrote a blog warning people about smart meters. So
So
they're going to show up at our house tomorrow, and I'm hoping they're educated.
well, okay. Warning that when you had quoted or somebody had quoted Eversource as saying, if you're qualified and this, that, and the other, be careful about the phrase if you are qualified, because if you have a solar situation where you sell back to the grid, I believe you will be required to have a smart meter, that they will not entertain you having an opt-out. So, please prove me wrong and send me mail. But they may say because you're selling back to the power company, you do not qualify. So I hope it's wrong.
I think because we are selling back to the company that we already have a smart meter.
Yes,
It just happens to be a solar meter. The sucker is zapping us every 15 seconds.
Yeah, so wrapping it in something is going to be, it's probably the kind of option that you have instead of opt out. But pursue the course and see. But don't be surprised as they say you can't if you have the solar. It's just one of the many decisions you didn't realize when you got the solar that you'd be, thinking about it.
We'd be zapping ourselves.
Or signing up for 20 years of commitment to something of zapping yourselves.
Okay.
Okay. Good to
All right. All right, folks. Well, you have been more than generous with your time tonight. If you want to save the chat, now would be the time. There's a ... in the chat panel. Mine is up at the top. It used to be down at the bottom, but if you click on that, it will give you the option to save the chat on your own computer if that's something you'd like to do. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to send out our slides and the recording. And as we said, baby steps, do what you can, protect yourself, and then maybe do a screening of Generation Zapped with your friends and neighbors and get others around to start listening on this. Do a potluck. Everybody likes to get together over a meal. And just sit down and watch it together. I've been brought in from time to time to bring people up to speed on what's happened since that film was released. So if I can help, then yeah, we'll do that. All right, folks, listen, you have a tech safe night and we will catch you next time.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Ask him about the shielding around the router.